Fergie Neves, who was like the guy who started Sultans, he was like, no, you can't. You remember Fergie? Do you guys know Fergie?
I know Fergie. I played on
Are you
Sultans.
serious? I played on Sultans.
And he was there. Really?
That was like the, yeah.
Said I got to say something, baby, hand me the mic. I said I got to say something, better hand me the mic. Well, can you handle it?
My first memories of basketball where I knew it's what I, like it was something very different than anything else I ever did was really, it's more from a spectator standpoint. I remember my family gathering at my grandparents' house, shout out 42 Shangiri, which is why I have this tattoo. My entire family would come, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandmothers, grandpas, and we would all just sit around and watch the NBA Finals. And it was like such an iconic 90s moment. We then kind of ventured outside, and my uncle built us our own basketball net, like with a backboard, like just straight up out of like plywood. And that's where I started to play basketball with my boy cousins. And then that was like really the start of my love for the game.
I think for me, I was like such an active kid. I always played a lot of sports, soccer, volleyball, basketball. And then it wasn't until I think it was my grade 5 like basketball tryouts. I was so excited. I wanted to make the team so bad. I played in grade 4, and so grade 5 comes around and tried out for my team, and then I didn't make the basketball team. And I remember I was so upset. I was so upset about it that I don't think it was probably that moment that I realized how important basketball was to me. I think it wasn't until like it was taken away from me that I realized how important it was for me. And so I remember at the time, like the principal was the one who was choosing the team, and I didn't make the team, and I saw him out for recess, and I was playing basketball, and I was going so hard to be like, you could have had this on your team. I'm like crossing all these people, like going so hard and like purposely like bumping into him or whatever, just to be like, yeah, you missed out on this. I'm going to be in the WNBA one day, or I'm going to be playing professionally. And so, yeah, I think it wasn't until it was taken away from me that I was like so upset about it, and I realized how important it was to me.
For some reason, grade 5 Olivia being that like obnoxious, I love it.
Yeah.
Not obnoxious, I should say bold. And,
yes,
like,
exactly. I am the same person.
Assertive. Yes, yes. That's funny. I love that, like, the community piece that you talked about and, like, spending time with your mom. For me, I think I resisted playing basketball up until, like, 9th grade because everyone who saw me, I was this height in 6th grade. So everyone who ever saw me was always like, you play basketball. And I wanted to be able to be like, no, actually, you're wrong.
I'm an accountant.
You're wrong. But growing up middle child of 2 brothers, was always, like, active. When I did pick up basketball in 9th grade, I just got so good so fast that I was like, the piece of like working on something and it, like paying off right away was like really cool. I just remember having a high school game and seeing in the newspaper that like I had scored 12 points, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
So that for me was definitely like a clicking moment of like, yeah, you're a hooper.
But isn't it like when in high school, aren't our total points only really up to like 16? So do you like technically got like most of the points?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, I guess. What do you mean 16?
Well, like when you like in high school when you play basketball, like the scores are so
22.
low.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Literally like 30.
Yes.
30.
That's true. Thank you for perspective.
There you go.
In percentages, not in
Exactly.
actual
Actual numbers. Yeah.
He scored all the points.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think the exact moment that I felt like I was seen or felt was noticing, because I was coaching at first, Canada Elite. It was like a grade 8 team, or grade 9, grade 8 team. And the girls just were so drawn to me, and they were like, oh wow, like you're a coach, but you're a mentor, but you're like, kind of like big sis. And I was like, I like that. And they're like, we've never had that experience before. So I was like, And then I looked around, when we were at tournaments and things like that, I was like, there's no other young black coaches that's a woman. And I was like, this is something that's definitely needs to be talked about. So when I started Hoop Queens, I was like, I really wanted to make sure that the next generation of women feel like it's a safe space to come back and coach the next generation. And that was like, I guess, at that moment where, before Hoop Queens started, when I was coaching, I felt like I was like, okay, this is something that I can, make my way or create my own path. And
It's kind of like the irony of being like asking the question, which is like, what's the moment you were seen, is when other people saw themselves in you.
Yeah.
And kind of is this whole like full circle moment. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's really cute.
I love that. And would you say that like empowered you to start Hoop Queens, seeing how much of an impact you had there? Because the piece of actually leaping and starting, which all three of y'all are entrepreneurs, and I commend y'all for that. But
yeah, I seen the lack thereof, like the representation, and I felt like, okay, well, now that there's one, I mean, there's of course other black coaches, but other black women that are coaching, but not as young as me, and I was like, okay, well, there's definitely some type of in-between or gap between the older generation and the younger generation, and I wanted to be that bridge. And then being the competitive basketball player, I was like, I want to be the best. Whatever I start, I want to be the best. So Hoop Queens, yeah, that's when I felt like, okay, like let's create our own, let's go away from like the aspect of like coaching, like women just coaching. Let's create our own thing. Let's create, you know, change the game a little bit, you know, move the needle, push the needle kind of thing. So I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, because I worked in healthcare for so long, like basketball and sport was always like kind of just on the side for me, you know, coaching at Launchpad. I was always around sports. I was always around people in kind of the sport industry, working with MLSE. And so I actually think it wasn't even until The Give and Grow, like it wasn't until I had something to offer maybe the sport community, whereas before, you know, working in healthcare, I was working at the hospital, maybe wasn't something that people could relate to. And so also being like, oh, like I also do a lot of community work. I also work in sport. I remember, Abby, one day we went out for brunch or something and you were like, you work in the hospital? Like I was working there for like 5 years. And I'm like, yeah, like, but no one really knew that side of me because they only knew me as, you know, Coach Olivia or someone who worked at MLSE and like a lot of the community stuff that I was doing even before the Give and Grow. And yeah, to be honest, I think being seen, the Give and Grow gave me a platform to be able to kind of share who I was, and a lot of friends who knew me beforehand just were kind of like, yeah, like you've always kind of been immersed in these spaces, but now you have this vessel that's able to kind of share with the world. And shout out to Abby, because Makeway is the first store that, had our product in stores or physically in person. And even this idea of like being seen and like seeing Abby do stuff, like she's from Mississauga, she's Filipino, and so also just seeing that of her, to be honest, I don't even know if I've ever told you this, but yeah, like watching you kind of pave this way slowly along the way and then giving me that opportunity, I was like, okay, how can I now do this for other people?
And then you did it to me.
and then
Literally.
And then Kisa came, you know, and so I remember even Kisa saying like, why do you want to help me? Why do you want to help Hoop Queens? And she was like, I don't understand it. I was like, I don't think you realize like the community support that I've had from Abby, from Shelby, from these like women in the basketball community that have just been so supportive that I'm like, how do I now continue to break down the doors for the next people coming up? And so was really kind of excited about doing that for you. Yeah.
I think a piece of it was when I first came to Toronto in 2018.
Ottawa girl.
Ottawa, but I was born by Barrie, lived in Kingston, lived in Ottawa, went to Minnesota, Kansas, Greece, and then Toronto. So I've been in Toronto 2018. I'm a scout with North Pole Hoops, my first time ever like doing that. It was such a natural transition from my job doing recruiting operations at Kansas State and having a network in the NCAA from having spent 7 years there. That coming to Toronto and being able to like identify talent and kind of like do for these girls or help at least what wasn't done for me in some ways.
Honestly, mine's more like I was a kid. So I started playing basketball around grade 7/grade 8. And immediately, like, obviously I watched it all my life, it felt like, and immediately was like, oh, I'm actually quite good at this. And the summer program between grades 8 and 9, so elementary school to high school, there was no girls program. But all my teammates, everybody that I knew, my kind of like little 8th grade crew, they were like, well, you should just play on the boys team. And I was like, I don't think that's allowed. And Fergie Neves, who was like the guy who started Sultans, he was like, no, you can't. Do you remember Fergie? Do you guys know Fergie?
So we named a team after Hoop Queens, Sultans.
Yeah.
And Fergie came
Are
and
you
honored
serious?
him.
Oh, I thought it was Sultans.
And he was
Really?
That was like yeah. So like his that 8th grade to grade like the summer league.
Yeah.
There was no girls, so I was the only girl on it, and Fergie was like invested in making sure that like
I know him
was
through the Jewel League, which has
Oh.
so many teams for girls
yeah
now.
yeah yeah.
He runs that. Yeah.
He's like sick. Like he's like a legend. So he was really the first person that was like taught me that like it doesn't actually matter if you're a girl or a boy. Like if you want to play the sport, you should just play it. I'll make space for you. So that was like the first time, and I was the only girl on the team. So I would travel with these boys and like play tournaments. And I remember this one game. It was like all of us like packed in this little Jetta, which is still like my favorite car. We all like got into this Jetta, and then we were all like listening to Wu-Tang, which is really inappropriate for like 8th graders. But we like traveled and would go to tournaments, and there was one tournament where like I still have it. My dad has this clip, which is amazing. But it's like literally me just like blocking the shit out of this boy.
I saw. I feel like you posted that somewhere. Yeah.
It was like this moment where like it was like all the guys on my team were like, "Yo, that's sick. Like that's good. Like you're legit."
Where's he now? The guy that got blocked?
Yeah, I know. He honestly, he was like a chubby little kid. I like it was like kind of mean. But like it was a moment where I was like, okay, cool. Like basketball's for me, and if it's for me, it could be for anybody. So. Shout out Fergie Neves. I didn't realize you guys knew him.
Yeah, he was. He came. We gave him flowers and stuff like that. And everyone had stories about how we went shopping and like just all these stories.
He's
about
make us wash his car.